Me too. I was 19 years old and I had just returned back from a track and field scholarship in Baltimore and returned to Toronto, Canada. Now, for a majority of my life, I envisioned myself as an athlete. I saw myself going to the Olympics. And so when I got back, I was like, what now? Like, who am I? What do I do? What does my life look like? And so, because I was in like decent shape from all those years of running and stuff, I was like, why not try my hand at acting? So I enrolled in an acting class and I really enjoyed it. And something cool happened. The instructor came up to me afterwards one day after class and was like, I also have an agency and I think that you could do something cool. I'd like to sign you on my roster. I just felt very vindicated, very chosen. I just felt like, wow, like finally, you know, I'd spent so long being mediocre in track and here I was trying something new, and for the first time I was selected as being special or exceptional. And so that just felt very affirming to me. The first thing she told me to do was go to a headshot photographer, and she was like, I want you to go to the best in town. Yes, they're expensive. Yes, they have a long time before you can book with them, but it's going to be worth it. So I was like, okay. So I got all my little pennies together, I saved up, and I went to this headshot photographer. And so when I arrived at their studio, there was a female makeup artist and a female assistant, and the environment was just really cool and fun. I remember feeling it being very light. I actually thought the photographer was gay, so we got to play around a lot. I just felt like a really good time. I enjoyed myself. Everyone felt like they really liked the pictures. And the headshot photographer afterwards was like, hey, this was a really good shoot. You do really well on camera. I'd like to do a creative session with you. And of course, I said yes. I'm new, I'm young, I'm trying something different. And here comes this big time photographer who's like, I think that you've got something special and I'm gonna give it to you for free, which let's not forget the fact this session was very pricey for me at the time. So I got really excited and he's like, come back next weekend. So I came back the following weekend, and when I arrived, there was no female assistant, there was no female makeup artist, it was just me and the photographer. So I'm going through my wardrobe that I brought, and then he was like, these are okay, but do you have like any, you know, lingerie sets that you brought? And I was like, no, I brought, you know, different underwears and bras for different clothes, but I don't really have sets. And he's like, okay, well, let's try playing it around. So we started taking some photos that I had with a shirt on and jeans. Then he was like, what about if you just took that shirt off? Just like you and your bra, like in more of an athletic picture, you know, you're in really great shape, let's get that shot. So we take some photos of me and just a bra, and then he was like, what if we just undid your pants? It'll be like Calvin Klein, kind of like, you know, an athletic wear shot, like an action shot, nothing sexual, just take your pants down a bit. So I took that shot, and I'm starting to get a very different vibe from the photographer this time around. My eyebrows start to raise, my eyes start welling up. I'm just starting to feel very trapped and uncomfortable. The photography session just kept progressing. Long story short, I ended up taking photos topless. I ended up taking photos with no bottoms on, just from behind. He had instructed me in one picture when I was in my bra and underwear. He took some pictures of from above of me, and then he was like, put your hand on your torso, which I did. And then he said, well, just move your fingers down a little lower, just put them a little bit underneath your underwear. And so I ended up taking these pictures with my hands in my underwear, and it just, it was uncomfortable. It was very disappointing experience. I don't really know how to explain the mix of emotions that I felt. I do know that at one point in the session, I had said to him, like, I don't know what these photos are for. I don't feel comfortable with them.
Sorry, I'm leaving.
Huh?
I'm leaving.
You're leaving forever?
No.
Which one? The thing?
No, I don't want the camera one.
You want the
other one's
JanSport? It might be on top of the thing. I was like, I really don't feel comfortable with these photos. I have no idea where they're gonna go. Would you mind if we just didn't? And he was like, okay, well, we won't do any more. Thank you. He's like, okay, we won't do any more topless photos then. We're just gonna do some from behind, just your butt. What's the big deal? And I remember feeling like, okay, that's the least I can do. That was my genuine reaction in that moment of like, what can I give this person that's gonna allow me not to give the most of myself, but still give them something, because I feel guilty. I feel like I let them down, or I mismanaged their expectations, or I must have gave off the wrong impression. So the least I could do was this for this person. Rather than just collecting my shit and getting out of there, I didn't. And I left feeling dirty. I left feeling like shit. I just felt small and pathetic, and I felt like I wasn't ready for this industry, and it was just not a pleasant time. So I remember waiting for the photos to come back, and how it worked back in those times is that you would get all of these printout, like these tiny proofs of your photos, and then you would have to order larger ones if you wanted them. So I waited, and then I finally got the call from his assistant to come in to pick up these proofs. I picked them up, and I remember it was a snowy day, and I got outside and I ripped open the package and I looked at them and I just burst into tears. I cried because I didn't know. What do you mean?
No keys in there.
I don't know.
You're like 20.
I was looking at these photos and looking into the eyes of someone I didn't recognize, and somebody who definitely looked uncomfortable, somebody who looked scared, who didn't look like themselves, who had tears in their eyes the entire time. And I just felt angry at the photographer for persisting. I felt angry at myself for not resisting, and I just felt ashamed. I didn't want to think about it anymore. I literally cut, because again, it was like a contact sheet. I cut out the photos that made me uncomfortable and I just shredded them up. And so I had this like mixed match of some that weren't that bad, like the ones of me with just my bra and my jeans open, I was like, those are fine. Ones that were like more of my face, those were fine. But any of the ones that were of me, you know, touching myself, or, you know, I mean, any of, I didn't keep them. And I got rid of them that day because I would just be terrified if my parents came upon that and saw those. And I just didn't want anyone to feel how I felt. I didn't say anything because I didn't want my family to feel like they had not protected me, or that worse, I was too stupid and naive and inept to protect myself. I didn't want the photographer to feel uncomfortable, or I didn't want to upset him because of his position in the industry. And so I did tell my agent, she asked about, oh, how did those creative shoot go? Because I told her really excitedly that I had gotten this creative extra shoot with this big time photographer, and she was like, how did it go? And I was like, they didn't go well at all. It was really, really uncomfortable. And she said, oh, that's a shame. That's too bad. And that was it. But that's probably how we all respond to each other when we hear about these stories in the industry. We say, oh, that's a shame, that's too bad, and we do nothing about it. I remember my best friend had wanted to do modeling, and she did a photography shoot, again, like a photo shoot, a test shoot with this photographer who was like a big time photographer in Miami, and something similar happened. Something worse actually happened. He said, if you want to be a model, you have to be able to pose naked, so we have to do some nude shots. And then she begrudgingly did those, and then he said, well, you actually have to know how to pose naked with a man. On a lot of times on set, you're going to have to know how to do that. And so he took off his clothes and took photos with her naked. Anyways, when she told me the story, I think my response probably was, that's too bad, that's a shame. My response probably was, something similar happened to me, and neither one of us did anything about it. So probably a few months after that experience, I remember meeting somebody in the industry who said, oh, I was on this photographer's website, I saw a photo of you. I didn't know that you took those kind of photos. And I just saw red. I was like, what? I couldn't even fathom what shot it could have been, what it was. And I didn't even have the heart to go and look. I just got to a computer and I emailed him and I said, look, these were not consensual. These were not what I wanted. I consented, but it's not what I wanted, which is a very confusing combination of things to put together. But anybody who's been in that position will understand what I'm saying. I didn't feel comfortable. I felt pressured. I felt manipulated. I did not want these images out there. Please remove and destroy them. And he wrote me back like, whoa, I had no idea you felt that way. I'm sorry that you did feel that way. I'll take the image down. It's not a problem. I just, wish you would have said something at the time. I did say something. So anyways, when this whole Me Too campaign came about, and I heard all the stories of the women who've experienced, the Harvey Weinstein allegations, of course, and then other people who've just come forward, like Jennifer Lawrence and Reese Witherspoon, with their own stories from different people. And then I also, hear Ryan Gosling, for example, or Ben Affleck, or these other male actors who are like, I had no idea. We all know. We all knew. Let's stop acting like we don't. And I wanted to make this video because we have to acknowledge that this is real, that this is many people's experience and stories, and not just in this industry, in many industries. And if you are a person in power, because it happens, women in power do this to other women in power, other men, sorry, not in power, but in vulnerable situations. We have to know that if you are a person in power and there is somebody who is a subordinate to you, who looks up to you, or who is trying to find their way, and you are a mentor or a guide or a gatekeeper to them, you should not put them in a position to have to choose between their self-respect and their potential. And any time that you make a sexual advance on a person in that position, that's what you're asking them to do. They don't normally want to take their shirt off. They don't normally want to come to your hotel room. Those experiences to you are nothing, and to you, you don't remember them, and they're not a big deal, but they sit with people for years and years, and they change their perspective on their self, on their position in this world, and on their potential. And I know that you may not think of it that way. I got into photography shortly after that experience because I was so sick and tired of seeing a male perspective, a male voyeuristic view of women's beauty. And at that time, people didn't have selfies, they didn't have their own camera, so people needed to go to photographers to get a Facebook photo or to get themselves a little MySpace photo. And a lot of the times I saw pictures that I saw eyes that looked really familiar. Eyes like mine that were afraid and concerned and confused and unsure, and knowing that something could have happened after the photo shoot, I thought, I want to be the person who allows women to create beauty on their own terms. I want to be the person who allows, if they want to take boudoir photos, I will facilitate that. But if they don't, I will never pressure them. And that's why I felt compelled to get into photography. Years later, when I started working as a sexual educator, I was doing a documentary, and I traveled to Atlanta to talk about the sex scene there and how Magic City in particular had influenced women's perspective on their own sexuality. And I met with this photographer who took sexy photos of women, and we were having a candid conversation. He was like, look, I'd be lying to you if I said a lot of these photos didn't end up in sex. And I just had a conversation with him about my experience, what I had gone through, what many had gone through, and he was like, well, it's different for me. And I said, it's not. You know, you might think that these are experiences that they want, or that it's the mood, or that, you know, it's normal, it feels natural. It doesn't. It scars people, it hurts them, it makes them feel like less than what they are. And the purpose of going to pursue your career, pursue your passions, is to be your highest, most elevated self. And when you manipulate that light in people, you cause damage that you just don't get to see afterwards because the cameras are no longer flashing. And so I guess I wanted to do this video to say that to any individual, to my young cousin who just started modeling, who is 16 years old this year. She's born 2001, that makes her, 16, who started modeling. It's not normal. You don't have to. To any photographer, person in power, producer, actor, director, or anybody, a boss at a job, if you find yourself in a position where it's easy to manipulate someone into a sexual act and they seem willing, they don't want to. More than likely, they don't want to. Don't. To anybody whom has never had either of these experiences happen to them, be an ally. Be an ally. If you hear a friend of yours tell a story that doesn't sound quite right or totally consensual, speak up and say something. If you have a friend, like I had a friend who went through an experience like that, don't just say that's a shame. Offer to do something more. Look for solutions to get that person justice, to have that individual who abused their position of power brought in, you know, to at least to put them on a watch list. I think the thing when it comes to sexual assault or sexual crimes, we always think about, oh, it's such a sensitive area, you can't do much. Less than 2% of acts of sexual abuse or sexual harassment are reported. And the reason why is it's a very uncomfortable blame game that nobody really wants to be a part of. But when you do report a case, even if it doesn't go to trial, even if you don't pursue any type of criminal charges against that person, what you do is create a police record of that individual. And so the next person who comes forward, now there's a case against them. And I know that seems like something small, but it's something significant that I wish I did years later when I had a completely non-consensual act, and I knew that that person from their reputation had done this to several people and thought that it was normal and it was okay. So I want you to encourage people who have experienced this to talk about it, either publicly on social media, wherever it is feels comfortable for you, or of course, best case scenario, to a police official or to a therapist if need be. Talk about it. It's not something that you have to experience alone. Don't try to save everybody else from the feelings of discomfort at the cost of your own health, your own mental health. It's important that we share these stories. It's important that we say, me too. So, me too.